The movie opens in 1815 France, where a cargo ship is seeking aid on an island for a ship captain who becomes sick. Edmond Dantès and his closest friend, Fernand Mondego, have their ship diverted to Elba. After a dangerous encounter with the island's guards, unexpected assistance comes in the form of the personal physician of exiled Napoleon. In return for the use of his doctor, Napoleon demands that Edmond deliver a letter for him, and mentions that the mission and the letter be kept secret. Unknown to the illiterate Edmond, the letter will inform Bonapartists in Marseille how to stage a possible rescue of Napoleon. Fernand watches this secretly from window. He is angry about his friend's secrecy. He reads the letter and understands everything in the letter. On his return to France, Morel names Edmond captain of one of his ships because of his commitment to save the captain in Elba. But this happens much to the anger of Danglars, the ship's second in command, who argued against going ashore. An improved situation in life prompts Edmond to propose to Mercedes Iguanada, his beloved. But his friend Fernand too loves Mercedes, as the three are childhood friends and grown up together. Fernand is jealous of Edmond for all the better things happening in his life, mostly his relationship with Mercedes. Seeing Edmond's good fortune and coupled with the fact that Dante and Mercedes are agreeing to marry, Fernand is deeply saddened. Depressed by all this, Fernand gets drunk and reveals the contents of the letter to Danglars, which would implicate Edmond in committing a treasonous act by the standards of the French government. The local police arrest Edmond and take him to the magistrate, Villefort. Villefort listens to Edmond's explanation and understands that Edmond is innocent and agrees to free him. But on second thought, he asks Edmond as to whom he was supposed to deliver the letter to. On listening to Edmond's answer, he becomes disturbed as the letter is addressed to Clarion, and Clarion actually is Villefort's own father. But he is an outspoken Bonapartist and a politically inconvenient father for a young man aspiring to a prominent law and political career in post-Napoleonic France. In order to eliminate all evidence that his father was involved in plans for an escape attempt by Napoleon from Elba, Villefort burns the letter and has Edmond arrested and taken to the Château d'If, a maximum security prison where he could live and rot forever with no prospects of getting out. In the prison, Edmond faces lot of troubles and hardships. Slowly, he loses faith in God as a result of the consistent beatings at the hands of the prison's cruel warden, Dolik. During the same time, Edmond befriends a fellow prisoner named Abbé Faria. Faria is a great scholar who gradually transforms Edmond into a wise, learned, and cultivated man. This in exchange for Edmond agreeing to help Faria tunnel out of the prison. Faria admits that he was a soldier who burned down a church with a band of rebels inside. To his everlasting shame, he decided to turn to religion as a priest to make amends for his sins. Being responsible for the great fortune of Caesar Spada during his days as a soldier, Napoleon had Faria arrested, believing he knew where the fortune was hidden, and kept him imprisoned until Faria admitted where it was, with Faria maintaining his ignorance of Spada's wealth. Along with finally piecing together how Fernand and the others were able to betray him, Edmond convinces Faria to teach him the skills of a soldier, including the use of a sword. One day, as Edmond and Faria are digging, there is a cave-in that fatally injures Faria. He reveals that he lied about not knowing the location of the treasure and gives Dante a map of where it is buried. He begs Edmond to follow the teachings of God and abandon his crusade for vengeance before dying. Edmond secretly places himself in Faria's burial sack, which is to be thrown over the cliffs and into the ocean alongside the prison. In an attempt to grab the keys from Dolik while being thrown, Edmond and Dolik are tossed into the sea, where Edmond kills Dolik and leaves his body in the ocean before swimming away. Edmond washes up on a shore far from the Château d'If, but discovers that it has been inhabited by smugglers and pirates. Luigi Vampa, the head of the group, offers Edmond the chance to save his life if he wins a knife fight with Jacopo for the entertainment of the crew, or after Jacopo had attempted to keep the gold for himself instead of sharing it with the crew. Edmond wins but spares Jacopo, convincing Vampa that both of their talents can be put to good use rather than just one. Jacopo pledges his life to Edmond for sparing him. Years later, the group makes their way back to Marseille, where Edmond and Jacopo decide to leave together for their own fortune. Edmond meets with Morel again after many years of imprisonment. Morel doesn't recognize him, and Edmond maintains silence about his identity. He learns from Morel that his shipping company was taken over by Danglars. Edmond's father had hung himself after his son was sent to prison. Villefort is now a chief prosecutor after the mysterious death of his father. Fernand has inherited his father's estate after his death, and Mercedes has married Fernand. All of the targets of his revenge live in Paris, in Parisian high society. Edmond leaves a small amount of gold for the financially crippled Morel. Edmond and Jacopo sail to the island of Monte Cristo, where they discover wealth beyond imagination. Rather than retiring to a life of leisure, his new mission is vengeance, with the targets of his revenge being Fernand, Danglars, Mercedes, and Villefort. Edmond realizes that to gain access to them, he'll need to reinvent himself. He uses some of his newfound riches to purchase a huge estate near Paris. He then proclaims himself to be the Count of Monte Cristo, and although nobody knows him, his wealth takes the elite aristocracy by storm. The Count plans a party at his new estate and invites many members of Parisian high society, including all the people of his vengeance. Now having considerable access to each of them, one at a time, he begins setting them up for failure and suffering. The Count gains close access to Fernand and Mercedes by paying Vampa to stage the kidnapping of their son, Albert. This enables the Count himself to save Albert. Having saved their son, the Count is now welcome in the home of Fernand and Mercedes. Edmond begins applying pressure to Fernand's financial life, forcing him to go back to Danglars and Villefort out of desperation. Albert mentions to his father that the Count had mentioned a Spada shipment and gold. He also mentions that the Count had discovered Spada's hidden treasure and that its next shipment will arrive soon. Fernand, Villefort, and Danglars plan to seize the treasure using Villefort's legal power to legitimize the theft, but are caught in the act as a part of Edmond's trap. Danglars is arrested while trying to offload the shipment. Taking note of his mannerisms, Mercedes soon discovers that the Count is actually Edmond Dantès. But Edmond still harbors intense resentment towards her as she married Fernand very shortly after his arrest and had Fernand's son, Albert. Her marriage to the man who had put him away drives him to despise Mercedes and keep her at arm's length. Edmond ultimately learns that Villefort had announced that Edmond was dead shortly after the onset of his imprisonment. Fernand, it turns out, had bargained for this announcement, from which he hoped to gain the hand of Mercedes by murdering Villefort's father at Villefort's request. Villefort is tricked into admitting this within earshot of the authorities and is arrested. After accidentally revealing information in a confrontation with Mercedes at his home, he admits to his true identity and what had happened to him, and angrily chastises Mercedes for marrying the man who had put him away. She reveals her string wedding ring, showcasing her devotion to him after all of these years, and they start loving each other again. Fernand's financial ruin, from a combination of his own gambling problems, bad business investments, and Edmond's invisible manipulations, force him to leave Paris to evade his debtors, and also the law, because of being charged with several crimes revealed by Villefort's confession. Unwilling to follow Fernand with their son, Mercedes finally tells Fernand the truth. Albert is the son of Edmond, as Albert was conceived before Edmond's arrest. With his life falling apart around him, Fernand leaves Mercedes and his son. Fernand arrives at the location where the treasure he and Villefort intended to steal. The chests are empty save for one that has a king chess playing piece, a token he and Dantès shared in their younger days. The Count reveals himself to be Edmond and confronts Fernand for his betrayal. But Albert, learning about the location of where Fernand was going, protects his father, believing the Count to be an adulterous traitor who stole Mercedes away from him and the family. Edmond threatens to kill Albert if he gets in the way of his vengeance. But Mercedes arrives before the fight is finished and reveals to both of them that Edmond is Albert's father. Shocked at both the revelation and the fact that Fernand is willing to let his own son fight to the death with his own biological father to save his own life, Albert lets his guard down. Fernand takes advantage of this moment to threaten to shoot Albert to get away, with Edmond begging him to spare his life in exchange for Edmond giving up his quest for vengeance after him. Just that time, Jacopo arrives and wounds Fernand with a knife toss, but his gun goes off, wounding Mercedes in the process. As Albert, Jacopo, and Edmond tend to Mercedes, Fernand rides away, only to realize that his life is now over with no wealth, status, family, or innocence in the eyes of the law to support him. He demands Edmond come out and face him, with Jacopo consoling Edmond that confronting Fernand is the only way to end this whole ordeal, and that even Faria would understand. Fernand tells Edmond that he could never live in a world where Edmond, the lowly son of a clerk, had everything he wanted in life. They engage in a violent clash that ends with Edmond killing Fernand. Sometime later, Edmond returns to the Château d'If after purchasing it. He speaks to Faria from beyond the world that he was right about how empty his path of vengeance was in bringing nothing but pain. He returns back to a life of family and God. He remarks that he intended to tear down the prison, but then changes his mind and decides to keep it as a reminder of his past. It's revealed that Mercedes, Albert, and Jacopo have made the trip with him. Edmond promises to do right by them as they all leave the island together.